So today I'm really excited to introduce EOS to y'all. But first I want to talk about how I got into this space and where we are and where we're going. So I first got into the blockchain technology when I was Google searching for how to create a currency because I wanted to create a decentralized currency. So I discovered Bitcoin back in 2009 when I was still able to mine whole blocks on a CPU. Things have been slowly growing as people try to apply blockchain technology to more and more things. And it's just exploding. Where is it all going? It's going toward everything being on the blockchain, or a blockchain. And Ethereum's tried to achieve some of that vision with the decentralized applications there. But let's talk about what's actually required to see blockchain go mainstream. If you're going to do currencies, even like credit cards, replace that, you need 20,000 transactions per second just to replace MasterCard and Visa. If you want to do applications like Facebook, that's 52,000 likes per second, not including all the posts and all the other user actions that occur on Facebook each and every day. And if you're in the financial industry and you're doing exchanges, you're talking 100,000 transactions per second, potentially per market. So if you have many different currencies, many different stocks, options, those things, this is the real world requirements that we're talking. But this is where we are today. Bitcoin's capped out at 3 transactions per second because of the block size. Ethereum caps out about 30 transactions per second due to gas restrictions. But there's an even bigger bottleneck here, and that's the single-threaded performance that's really keeping all blockchains back. So we need to bridge this. So I've been building high-performance blockchain technology for a while because I've actually built several blockchains before. So back in 2013, I set out to build a decentralized exchange called BitShares. Now, at the time, you had Bitcoin and a whole bunch of Bitcoin clones. No one had any concept of the type of applications we see today. It had very different requirements than a currency. But back in 2013, it introduced the concept of a DAO. So back then, I introduced it as a DAC, but now it's more commonly known as a DAO, and it's sort of taken over things. 2014, I launched BitShares. In order to launch BitShares as a decentralized exchange, I had to invent delegated proof of stake. Delegated proof of stake gives us 3-second confirmations, 1.5 seconds from the time the user does something on average. Very predictable, reliable block production. The very first version of BitShares was built off a lot of the ideas of Bitcoin and used similar technologies, but it just didn't perform well enough to achieve the goals that you need from an exchange. So in 2015, I created Graphene with our team. Graphene was a complete rewrite of BitShares, and with it we were able to achieve 100,000 transactions per second on a single machine. Recent decentralized global stress testing demonstrated 18,000 transactions per second on a distributed network without a hiccup. The other thing we introduced with BitShares was account names that are human usable. Advanced hierarchical dynamic threshold multi-sig. It's a lot of different properties there, but basically the idea is an account is separate from a key. And you can have multi-sig of accounts where each account can update their keys without impacting all the different groups that they're multi-sig of. And so you can structure organizations and delegate permissions to other users without having to update every single multi-sig account every time one person wants to change their key. So we have all these innovations on the BitShares side of things, but we're still struggling with, well, how do you get this mainstream? Well, nothing's more mainstream than social media. So in 2016, we conceived the idea of Steam, which was to do, think Medium Reddit on a blockchain. But we had new challenges here. Users expect not to have to pay anything in order to use social media. You don't want to pay for every vote. You don't want to pay for every post. People need account recovery. This is social media. It's not your bank account. They don't have to go through KYC just to get involved. So what Steam did is it took the block rewards, the $3 billion every single year that's wasted mining Ethereum and Bitcoin, and redistributes it to people who are posting content on the blockchain. That was the basic idea. We wanted to enable thousands of people, massive decentralization allocation of the funds. But these are less sophisticated users. They're not going to protect their social media password with the same level of care that they would their bank account. And if you lose your social media account, it's a big deal. It's your identity online. It's not just say, oh, well, I lost the funds, I create a new account. They could be impersonating you and things like that. So it's really, really important that the users have the same exact experience as they would on Facebook or Reddit when they're using this. So Steam is the first blockchain application that users don't even realize they're using a blockchain. They show up at steemit.com, they get a password, they log in, everything's going on the blockchain. Every vote, every post, every comment, and it's organic. They start getting paid, they start earning tokens, and after they've got $1,000 tokens, then they figure out how to do the KYC and exit. So Steam went from concept in January to working blockchain that launched in March to working website in July to to be in the top 10,000 sites in the world with 15,000 active users, all within 3 months to 9 months. So 2016, it's Steam. It's been a huge success. It's brought a ton of people. There's more women per men ratio in Steam than any other blockchain in the industry. It's really been a great thing. And it's also been able to seamlessly upgrade over time without any hiccups in the network. What might be surprising is that when you look at the blockchain industry, the leaders, Ethereum and Bitcoin, the actual network usage, Steam and BitShares have more real-world transactions occurring every single day than the rest of the majors combined. This is very exciting because it shows that we've made it accessible to people. It's impacted real people solving real problems. But these are application-specific blockchains. What happens when you want to have multiple applications on one chain? You really need to scale. If you want to do Steam and BitShares on a single chain, that's going to require some scaling. So if you look at the blockchain industry, everyone's trying to build their smart businesses, decentralized organizations, whatever the phrase is. And we've got this decentralized computer, and we've got these apps. There's something missing. Every app developer is trying to solve the same problems. They've got to provide the account systems, the recovery processes, the multi-sig, manage all these challenges. What they're missing is the operating system. This provides all the common features that every application depends upon, allowing applications to focus on just what makes them different. There's a huge commonality between Steam and BitShares in terms of functions that are identical, and a very small difference in terms of the application business logic. So, what do decentralized applications actually require if you want to scale? Well, for starters, they need to be accessible from a web browser. Everyone's got a web browser. They should be able to sign up and start using it. It's nice if they can also download an app, but for most applications, the first experience people have is through the web browser. They need to scale to millions of users. If you can't scale to millions of users and you spend a lot of money building an application, you can't get enough users to monetize it. So being able to scale is critical to actually earning a return of investment on your application development. It needs to be free for the users of your app. So if you're building social media, you might have monetization strategies of ads or whatnot, which are separate from the actual use of your application. It needs to be responsive. When users interact with your application, they need to get confirmation immediately, reliably, predictably, just as if they had submitted a request on a website. So you're talking submit, 1 second later, you've got your confirmation. Things change. No business plan survives first contact with the market. You can't program your business to one time and have it be set for life. As competitors will come up, it will need to be upgradable. It needs to be accessible with human-friendly account names. People shouldn't have to deal with hashes, public keys, private keys, cold storage, all those concepts that we're so used to in the cryptocurrency realm make it completely inaccessible to ordinary people. Account recovery and bug recovery. Any software engineer knows that perfect code is impossible to write. It's impossible to make something provably correct, because how do you prove that your proof is right, and cursive, so on. So you need to be prepared for what happens when there are bugs. So EOS provides all that to application developers, and it does all this while introducing the concept of parallel processing of smart contracts or applications. What this means is EOS can execute BitShares and Steam and all the other applications in parallel. You can divide up your application to run itself in multiple parts. This gives you horizontal scalability, which means you can throw more nodes. You can put entire clusters behind processing of the transactions to scale up to any transaction volume you want. And this is made possible because all the applications communicate with each other asynchronously. There's some subtleties to computer science as far as getting why it needs to be asynchronous, but without asynchronous communication between applications, you can't scale horizontally. And that same process allows it to be interoperable with other blockchains. So EOS is the first blockchain operating system. It provides your applications with databases with a schema and multiple indices, so you can have sorted data that's easy to manage. It gives you account permissions and a whole set of users. So once a user's set up, they have their social media profile, the social media app. They now have an Exchange account, and they can reference it by a name. They have their account recovery partners, so that if their account's hacked, they can get it back without compromising the security of their account. It handles all the complexities of scheduling tasks and messages across multiple CPU cores or even clusters. It handles all the authentication and key management, so you can focus on business logic, not cryptography. And it handles all the inter-application communication. So EOS is the operating system that we've been waiting for that allows us to focus on building the apps that our users ultimately need. And it does so without getting in your way. It does so without forcing gas on your users, without requiring your users to purchase anything before they can start using the application. And it also dramatically accelerates the rate at which your developers can build applications, because they don't have to build all this. This is complex code that took years of experience building Steam and BitShares to figure out the process for. And by having that all standardized, it can be done in a very high performance manner. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper here into some of the technical aspects of it. We've already talked about parallel execution, which means we can run in clusters, multiple core machines, made possible by asynchronous communication. But we also separate processing into several parts. Read-only parts, authentication of the user, signature verification, from the actual application of the business logic. A transfer is a simple action of reducing one person's balance and increasing another. But all the authentication steps are validating signatures, checking to make sure that it got sufficient funds. The authentication steps only need to happen once when the block's produced. But after it's irreversibly included in the blockchain, you never have to do anything like that again. And the other way that we scale is we put the source code on the blockchain. That means that it's human readable what the contract says. Everyone can see it, and then the developers can optimize it later. You can compile your code to different virtual machines, compile it down to native assembly if necessary, all without breaking consensus. And the other thing is we eliminate gas. So if you're familiar with Ethereum, it counts every instruction you take and charges you as you go. We don't have to do any of that. But if you count instructions, you're doubling the amount of work you have to do. I do something, add something, do something, add something. So those are all the things we do to make it more scalable. So each and every application can process thousands of transactions sequentially, but then you can have as many cores as you can throw at it. It's flexible. because we use delegated proof of stake, if your application is broken or fails in some way, the block producers, which are elected by the stakeholders, can freeze the application until a bug can be released, and then it can update the code. So if the DAO was implemented on EOS, it would have been frozen, it would have been fixed, it would have been applied, all without having a hard fork, and all without disrupting any other application on the chain. It's also flexible in the sense that you only have to run the applications you need. If you're running an exchange, you don't need to run the social media apps. You can configure your local node to just process the data you care about so that not every node has to run and maintain the full state. So we talked a little bit about the governance. We're innovating on the decentralized peer-to-peer terms of service, or constitution, if you will. This sort of establishes a common jurisdiction for disputes among users of the platform, and a process by which people can resolve bugs when they come up. And we try to make it as usable as possible for the developer. This really aids in the development speed. Provide a web toolkit, so if you're familiar with how applications are developed using React, JS, and the Flux architecture, it'd be very similar. Web developers won't have to worry about key management because we'll have the software in the browser that manages all the keys and all the permissions and all the signing. And you just say, do this, develop this form, submit it to the blockchain. Everything's self-describing, so the data that goes on the blockchain can be read by humans, but it's also compressed so it's efficient for the machine. And the description is all on the blockchain as well. The permission system is all declarative. These are account names. I can say, my account gives your account permission to transfer this currency. Very fine-grained level permission, complete with the multi-sig system from BitShares. So this is the generalization of the permission schemes of Steem and BitShares. So all this is geared toward making it usable for the developer. And what we realized is you want to empower the developer to adapt to the user rather than making the developer adapt the user to the restrictions of the platform. So you don't want to make the user use addresses, don't make the user figure out those things. You want to serve the users, not serve the limits of the architecture. So we have a token in EOS. It's called EOS. And it works on the same principles as Steem. Network bandwidth allocation. In this case, it refers to computational power, network bandwidth, and storage. Unlike other systems, there are no fees. It's not consumed. If you own 1% of the network, you have access to 1% of the computational and bandwidth capacity and 1% of the available storage. And you can then lease it out to other parties or use it for your own app. It means once you fund your app with enough EOS to support its usage, you don't have to worry about topping it off or paying fees because it's a own model versus a rental model. Which we also believe that the application developer that should provide the service. Blockchain is like Amazon. You buy the servers, you host your application. You buy your capacity on the blockchain, host your application, your users use it for free. You figure out how to charge your users and make a profit from whatever your application may be. That way, you don't have to, if Amazon worked the way that blockchains work today, every time a user would visit your web page, you'd make the user pay Amazon for your hosting service. Yeah, it's small little micropayments. It just doesn't make sense for the user, it doesn't make sense for the business owner, and it doesn't give you flexibility. So block production is controlled by stake-weighted voting, stake EOS tokens. So that's just traditional delegated proof of stake. I encourage you to look at how Steem and BitShares do it. It would be a very similar model. And the last aspect of the token is it's got a constitutionally limited 5% annual increase in supply, which could be lowered to 0 because there is a, users can vote on 3 different ways of distributing the funds. You can either have it destroyed, which means you have a no inflation model. You can have the funds sent to a centralized foundation, like the Ethereum Foundation or the EOS Foundation. And you can create apps like Steam that have massively decentralized distribution and allocation of the funds. This system would be distributing $1 billion a year at the market caps of Ethereum and Bitcoin, which is a huge amount of potential to fund interesting applications and in development in the EOS ecosystem. So this project is backed by a wonderful team that I've gotten to know over the past several months with a broad set of skills and diverse background. And we've got lots of partners here. So I'll open up for questions, and if you have any questions, go from there.
Now, if we could just use the mic to get the questions on the tape, that would be great.
Thanks for the presentation, Dan. I was just wondering, will every account created on EOS have to sign the Constitution?
Yes. One of the ideas we had with EOS is that every transaction can include the hash of the Constitution for the blockchain, and the Constitution itself is something that can modify and evolve. You can think of the Constitution as parallel to the code. It captures the intent of what the blockchain is, the code's trying to express, and when there is a dispute, it helps guide which way the blockchain should go.
I see, thanks. So if the Constitution is modified, will everyone have to re-sign it?
There's a lot of opportunity to innovate in this space. A lot of these details are in this box, but the idea is that when you originally signed the Constitution, you also agreed to the governance process, the update process, and the Constitution can only be modified by a supermajority of people accepting it. And it expires if you don't use the platform. So basically, if you want to continue using it, you have to continue to agree to it. It's just like Facebook or any other service, updating the terms of service. It really establishes a framework in which people can work together. So we've written several articles on Steemit, steemit.com/@EOS. I guess it's EOS.io. Follow our blog, go to EOS.io, and it have links to all the different places you can find out about that. But there's lots of material about the governance that has been discussed there.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
Hi, excellent. You said the inflation is capped at 5%. What would constitute the lowering of that? For a consensus? Or,
Yes, the funds are always allocated somewhere. They're always allocated to some smart contract. If they're allocated, the top 3 contracts with the most votes get funds proportional to the number of votes they receive. So if you've got a contract that says can't spend it, locks it away forever, you've ended the inflation rate, and if it gets the majority of the votes, that's more or less where the funds would go. So it's very dynamic, very responsive to the needs of the stakeholder as they vote with their stake tokens.
To the inflation issue again, why is it not possible to increase the money inflation in money supply?
Like so many things, it's a judgment call. We want EOS to be a predictable, reliable token. 5% is about the threshold before people start worrying about the rate at which tokens are being devalued or increasing the supply. It's also, the Bitcoin has been at 5% or higher its entire life. Ethereum is currently around 10%, I believe. So all the projects that you're used to have much higher rates. This is a very conservative rate. And I believe that's all it's going to need in order to have tons of resources for growing the platform.
What is the current project status and what is the roadmap?
Current project status is we started a couple months ago. We'll be releasing our code on GitHub after this conference, and we have a test get out this summer. So that's about where we are. If you want to have the latest updates on what's going on, visit eos.io sign up for our newsletter, you find out more information about the distribution and stay up to date on any releases. We'll be releasing updates frequently as fast as we can get the information out there.
We're trying to treat project information very sensitively in this project, so we're going to start with our mailing list, and then we'll know everything first. So we put a lot of effort into controlling information to ensure that there's not an inside group of people that has access to things prior to the greater community.
So Brendan, maybe you can take some time to talk about our partners.
Well, you've hit a little bit about them. So, we've spent a lot of time trying to get the right support behind this project over the last several months. And as you can see, we've brought in some exchanges and also some leaders in terms of venture capitalists in the space. We also have partners in this business, Brock Pierce, chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation, and founder of Blockchain Capital. Also Li Xiaolai, a large evangelist for Bitcoin in China, and Bo Shen, who's the CEO of Fenbushi. We also have several other people who are not named here. But we've really been focused on getting industry support so that we could roll this out properly. And just to touch on the governance a little bit, to add a little bit to what you said. So basically what the governance structure that's been put forth is that we have 3 collective benefit contracts. And what that allows is for the community to decide where these emissions are going. So opposed to the over $3 billion a year that are being spent on mining in just Bitcoin and Ethereum alone, which is essentially money that is evaporated. It is gone, right? And if you actually divide that up amongst the transactions that are happening on the network, you're looking at somewhere between $2 to $5 per transaction is actually what we're paying to process transactions on Bitcoin and Ethereum right now. And so these contracts allow that money to be recycled, right, in a similar fashion, but go to where the community would like in a form that will benefit the greater network. One of these problems, if you don't have a situation like this, right, it basically encourages everyone to operate in their own interest. And you have certain degrees of stagnation, development or technology. No one is if somebody owns 5% of the network, it's inequitable for them to be funding future development. So a lot of weird dynamics come into play. And we think it's important that there is essentially a platform that allows the community to come together and push proceeds or value into opportunities that are going to benefit the greater good.
There are certain classes of problems that everyone benefits from, but no one really should fund. If you own 1%, you have to get a $100 return on investment. 100 times growth of the platform is recovering $1 investment. And that's just not sustainable. It was a challenge we had in BitShares before we switched into a model that would enable it.
Are you guys able to elaborate a little bit about the economic rights from token ownership? Will there be markets between the token holders and the users of the platform itself?
Well, one thing I want to say first off is that actually what we're actually just doing is we're publishing open source software. So we can talk a little bit about the types of ideas that we have with these tokens, but ultimately whoever launches the blockchain and whichever one the community adopts, there's going to be a certain set of traits associated with that coin. So when we're talking about some of these things that we're predicting the token may have in terms of its value and properties, it's nothing that we can actually control ourselves because we're essentially just opening up the software for the public.
I'll add to that the Constitution is part of the source code, is hashed into every transaction that's signed and validated. So the Constitution will lay out the expectations of the block producers and the users as far as how that stuff is supposed to work. So we'll propose that when we release the code, and anyone who just runs the default code will get those rights, and we'll implement the automatic management of those rights. So with that said, I'm going to refer to an implementation rather than something that we will be providing, because we will not be running the nodes ourselves. This will be people elected by the token holders. And they'll be the ones that will have to provide the resources because they have the nodes. So the idea is the block producers collectively report how much storage capacity they have, and that capacity divided by the amount of EOS in circulation determines how much storage you get per token. And then the calculations also depend upon the efficiency of the software that's running and the performance of the hardware it's running on. So the block producers will also measure that and rate limit people accordingly. If you'd like to see how it works in practice, I would encourage you to look at Steam. Steam has no transaction fees on anything, but rate limits users and doesn't have spam attacks. And it's been very effective system.
And as the network continues to get larger, right, or more congested, and the witness nodes or the block producers upgrade their hardware, that will actually increase the throughput or bandwidth capacity associated with each individual token. And as Dan pointed out before, we don't believe that that you need to draw this economic tie between token holders and dApp developers, because we don't believe they're the same people. And what this platform will allow is for an individual to hold or invest in EOS tokens and actually delegate the unused throughput to individuals. And it actually has the potential to open up a complete free market hosting economy, which is a proven concept that we've already seen before. So one person could delegate their tokens to an organization that could potentially redelegate that throughput to any number of individuals with any other a very complex, potentially complex hosting packages that are specific to that particular application's needs.
The implications of all this is that early on there's going to be so much surplus capacity that any reasonable application that's behaving properly is going to get free transactions. They're going to be free for the foreseeable future until an application gets mass adoption with legitimate transactions, and only then will the rate limiting start to affect things. And if an application misbehaves, the large token holders can remove the delegation of their bandwidth and resource rights from that application, which will restrict it back very naturally until they buy the resources themselves.
Okay. Just to make sure I got this right, is it the blockchain itself is not running yet, and there is no actual plan on how to boot the blockchain, or?
There is a plan on how to start up the blockchain. We will have a test network, and we'll have a long period of time during which the test network will be available for developers to get familiar with it, for us to learn. We want to take this want to get feedback from everyone, make sure that we have all the requirements necessary to implement all the applications before we lock it down in stone. Because once you lock it down in stone, it's very hard to change things. So we want to make sure that for your planning purposes, that you have something you can work with this summer, that we can, so you can start developing your applications. But it takes time to build applications and business plans around them. So by the time your business is ready, there will be a platform ready. Just remember, we built Steam from concept to working product in 6 months, including the blockchain, entirely new blockchain. So we've got experience doing all this stuff. This is not completely new technology. It's just an incremental improvement, adding parallelism to the proven technology behind BitShares and Steam. So we'll hopefully be able to leverage a lot of the stability that those chains have had and get the product working very quickly.
Let's go ahead and give them a round of applause.